Good morning. Good morning. We'll have Steve Palazzolo discuss some NFL SEC football with you. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for making us your SEC football and sports and entertainment show of choice in the great state of Mississippi. Big weekend in Stark Vegas. Ole Miss at Mississippi State. And holy smokes, they are, Starkville will be packed and rocking. So it's going to be a big weekend. Ole Miss at Mississippi State this weekend. Duty Noble Field. And 3-game series. This should be wild. In-state rivalry. Two teams want it bad. The It's Too Toxic rivalry goes this weekend in Stark Vegas. Duty Noble Field. Mississippi State and Ole Miss. 3-game series, Blake.
I mean,
it's going to be wild to see who takes the series.
It's been over 365 days. They've missed 5 scheduled games.
Isn't that crazy?
Give me all of this. Inject it straight into my veins.
Well, we are. Just give me 24 hours.
I'm
well, a
ready
little bit
to
more
go.
than that.
Ready to go.
Evidently, though, the weather just shifted, which is unfortunate. I did not see that. It had looked really, really good all week. And there's a new weather update that is not as good, but we'll see. Kind of monitor that throughout the show. I'm not a meteorologist. But our next guest, maybe. He is Steve Palazzolo, Pro Football Focus, PFF.com. He's got the podcast with Pro Football Focus. He joins us on the Modelo guest line. Steve Palazzolo, good morning, buddy. How are you?
Good morning. Great. And, enjoy that baseball.
Well, we are. We're Blake and I will be heading up, not together. We see each other enough during the week. But we'll be going to Starkville for the series. And so here's how it goes down if you make it in mid to late May, depending on your schedule. There will be the outfield will be packed, Palazzolo. I mean, packed.
Yeah.
And it'll be plenty of beer, bourbon, Tito's, and then all the grills will be loaded full of food. I'm talking about like ribeyes, pork tenderloins, deer meat, smoked chicken, wings, ribs, you name it. And so that's how they're going to roll this week, along with 3 baseball games between 2 top 10 teams, with a lot of MLB prospects on the 2 teams. But it's pretty cool, huh?
Man, that sounds great. Yeah, the food sounds amazing. All right, I'm even more tempted to get down there.
I'm telling you. All right, the flight is on me if you can make it happen after the draft. So let's discuss the NFL draft. I want to go over this one more time with you. I may do this the next 2 times we have you on. But the 3rd pick in the NFL draft to the San Francisco 49ers. You have this group that I respect that claims it's going to be Mac Jones. And then you and others, which I kind of like, are going, no way Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch moved around like this to go get a Mac Jones. So if the 3rd pick in the draft was tonight by the San Francisco 49ers, do they take Mac Jones?
I mean, my guess is no. I mean, there's definitely a lot of people that are believing it's Mac Jones, and they might have more inside knowledge than I do, but I don't know if Kyle's really told anybody yet. So all I can do is go off of what I feel Kyle Shanahan would do. And I just don't see them going to Mac Jones. You know, it's kind of like, in college, a lot of times you go from, sometimes you have like the disciplinarian coach, or it happens in the NFL a lot. You have the disciplinarian, and then you go to the players coach, and you kind of cycle back and forth between opposites as you're switching coaches. I feel like teams like to do that with their quarterbacks sometimes as well. And I'm looking at Shanahan thinking, if he's looking at Jimmy Garoppolo, he's upset that Jimmy Garoppolo's only started 48% of his potential starts. Okay, so there's an injury issue. But I'm also wondering if he's just feeling limited by having a pocket passer and not having a guy that can take his run game to the next level and be a running threat and then really keep defenses off balance. So my initial instinct was, okay, Shanahan has to be looking at Justin Fields or Trey Lance. And Trey Lance is the more natural runner, and Justin Fields is the more natural passer of the two, but they both have rushing ability that Shanahan would tap into as much as any coach in the NFL. So I would just lean, I think it's Fields or Lance, and Kyle Shanahan's looking, man, like I can hit a home run with these guys and build up some of their deficiencies rather than getting a Mac Jones who might be just as good as Jimmy Garoppolo, but, maybe a little bit cheaper.
Okay, that last word, cheaper. Steve Palazzolo, PFF.com, Pro Football Focus on the Modelo guest line. Is this where we're going right now in the league with a certain group of NFL coaches? Offensive-minded, young guys, no BS. They just assess the situation at the position that they specialize in, Shanahan and McVay, and maybe some others. And they just say, this guy's not good enough, and we're moving off of him. Whereas the older generation of NFL coaches would have stayed with a Garoppolo or a Goff 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. Is that how you see it, Steve?
Yeah, I think it shows the nature of the NFL, which is finding a starting quarterback right now is not difficult in the NFL, but you see the advantage when you have a top guy. Kyle Shanahan's in the division with Russell Wilson, and you can make a pretty strong argument. Kyle Shanahan has been a much better coach than Pete Carroll over the last couple of years, but the difference has been Pete Carroll has Russell Wilson, and Kyle Shanahan does not. And not only does he not have Russell Wilson, but he's had to trot out C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins and backups essentially. So I think you just look at the quarterback advantage and you say, hey, Jimmy Garoppolo is nice, or Jared Goff is nice. They're fine. They can get us to a Super Bowl. But the Shanahans and McVays of the world want to take it to the next step. And you see what it's like when you have a top 10 quarterback. So the Rams made the move to go get Matthew Stafford. And I don't know if he's a massive upgrade over Jared Goff, but I think he's an upgrade. And the Niners are saying, okay, I think we're pretty much out on Jimmy Garoppolo. And, maybe they put him back out there this year if they have a guy that's more of a developmental prospect, but I doubt it with all the draft capital that they've given up. So you just say, look, if I have a middle-tier quarterback, I can do better, and I need to find that top 10 caliber guy. And I think it is a huge advantage in the NFL.
All right, now here's what our friend Dave Bartoo, and you're familiar with Bartoo. Y'all are way more into everything that you're doing than he is, but for him, it comes down to the number one thing is QB effect in college. And did the QB perform above expectations? His argument is Mac Jones at Bama, Justin Fields at Ohio State, that any of those QBs that come through, because one's a number one recruiter and the other one's a number 3 recruiter in the country, every time they walk out on the field, they have so much more talent than the other team that they play, and that's the reason why their quarterbacks don't work out at the NFL level. I know we hit on a little bit of that last week, but I would just like to get your takeaway from that. Performed above expectation. Oh, also he said Trey Lance is the same thing as Mac Jones, just in a different division. That North Dakota State walks out on the field and they have better talent than everybody else in their division. Plus, Trey Lance has only started 17 games and only played 1 in 2 years, and that's a recipe for disaster too. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's some truth in those statements. I mean, does he have the same stance on Trevor Lawrence? Because that's the same. I mean, Wilson the only guy that he would buy into in this class?
Yes. He doesn't have.
Okay.
He doesn't have quite as much concern with Trevor because Clemson is right around a 9 or 10. They've moved into the top 10 in recruiting, right? Over the last 5 or 6 years because of Dabo and Clemson's success. You can tell he's buying a little bit more of Trevor, but yes, the Zach Wilson, he does like him because he said at BYU he performed above expectations.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think – look, I think when you're evaluating quarterbacks, you do want to take in all the possible information, right? And that is – but there's never just a piece of information and then full stop, because I think you're missing – in that scenario, you're missing Joe Burrow, who I think is still in line to be a star. And I don't know what LSU's recruiting rankings were historically. I do know that
they're top 5. They're elite.
Yeah, and I know that last year the team had a bunch of first-round picks. I mean, it's the same thing as throwing to Alabama's receivers behind their offensive line, although LSU's line wasn't great. So I think you're going to miss people along the way, the same way you're going to miss people if you just look at traits or if you just look at PFF grade or whatever it is. So I think you have to take all of that information into account. I think the way we would use it at PFF is say, okay, Mac Jones in our grading system was fantastic. However, as good as our grading system is from a production standpoint at isolating the quarterback and isolating players, you can be elevated, right? If you have a Devontae Smith open at all times and a Jalen Waddle open behind the defense, you do have more opportunities to grade better and produce better. So I think that context is important, but I wouldn't just leave it at that and call it a day. I think it's just another piece of information, and I think there's some recent trends that would back that up with Patrick Mahomes coming out of Texas Tech and Dak, of course, and even Justin Herbert coming out of Oregon.
Sure.
I think Herbert underachieved at Oregon as a player, but when you look at his supporting cast and situation and play calling, it was like, all right, they didn't do the best that they could with Justin Herbert. So
now that's what Bartoo said. He said their OC wasn't any good, and
right,
and that you nailed it. And Herbert was his number one guy last year, and Herbert had a really nice year, good year for the LA Chargers. Okay, so when you're looking at, here's what else Bartoo said. He said if he was the Falcons, he would trade out of that pick and go for Matt Ryan's successor next year. In that he thinks, everybody's talking about how this is a really, really good QB class. He thinks it's garbage. Now, how would PFF look at this class as a whole, from Trevor to Zach Wilson to Justin Fields to Trey Lance to Mac Jones and I guess Kyle Trask, Kellen Mond, maybe some others. But as a whole, how does PFF, Pro Football Focus, grade this class compared to, others in the last 4 to 6, 7 years? Steve?
Yeah, I think it's really good, and so we're looking at probably five potential first rounders. And when you're evaluating quarterbacks, I think it's almost understood that you're not going to be 100%, right? There are going to be outliers and there are going to be misses, but I think there's 5 guys who could potentially be good, who are really good in franchise type of guys in the first round. And I think Kellen Mond and Kyle Trask, they're good backup types. And you just bring them in and see if they can develop. So I like the class. I think it is good. There's always I look at quarterbacks though with inherent risk. I don't want to be the guy that drafts Trey Lance in the first round, but I can understand it. I could see it. I could see a path for him to have success. Honestly, I thought Lamar Jackson a couple of years ago was a little risky because he didn't have great accuracy. He wanted to play in the pocket and various things, but there was a path to success for Lamar Jackson. I didn't love Josh Allen, but there was a path for him to succeed if a few things went right, and I think both of those things have happened for those two guys. So I look at quarterbacks from that, where there's this range of outcomes, and if a guy has a chance, he's worth the risk, right? I don't think it's bad for a franchise to miss on a quarterback, as long as, much like the Cardinals a couple years ago, you're willing to move on from, say, a Josh Rosen.
Gotcha. Okay.
So missing isn't bad. If you go back and say, oh, this guy missed on 3 quarterbacks, it's okay as long as you continue to look and find the next guy, because the payout eventually will be worth it and it doesn't matter. So I look less about hits and misses and say 5 guys are worth the risk in the first round at quarterback. And I think, probably 3 of them pan out, and a couple guys maybe you have to move on.
Okay. And so Miami is probably the Dolphins are in that space with Tua. He's either got to get it done this year or they probably move on. Do you agree?
Yeah. And it's okay to be that quick. It's okay to say, and it's not even a knock on Tua. It's not like, hey, you got to give him time. You don't have to give anybody time. You can make your decision as quickly as possible. And then, or, again, when Miami was sitting at 3, I don't think it would have been crazy for them to draft Justin Fields, because it's just so important to nail the quarterback. It is so important to get that position right. And taking 2 is better than maybe just taking 1 until right? Until you feel good, like, hey, Baker Mayfield, okay, I feel good about him. Josh Allen, I feel good. Then you're okay. But until you feel good about that guy, bring somebody else in. And I think what the Jets have showed with Sam Darnold, even a guy that had 3 poor seasons was still able to bring back a 2nd, 4th, and 6th rounder. So it's like you can still sometimes get out from under that miss, so to speak, mitigate some of your losses. But the most important thing is finding the next quarterback.
Yeah. All right. So you're okay with – I like that. You're okay with continuing to draft QBs until you get one. Arizona is a great example. Boy, they moved off Rosen. And then, boom, they got Kyler Murray, who may not be great, but he's good. And you can win games with him. So did the Jets make the right move, moving Darnold, and now they'll draft Zach Wilson in PFF's opinion, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a chance Darnold could be a nice little reclamation project, and I think it would have been fine. I would have been fine having Sam Darnold as my backup if I was the Jets, but getting a second rounder, even next year's second rounder, a 2, 4, and a 6 for Darnold based off what he's done, I'm absolutely making that trade every single time. So love what the Jets did, and they're right to move on and see what Zach Wilson can be.
All right. Steve Palazzolo, PFF.com. He's got the podcast, Pro Football Focus. He joins us on the Modelo guest line. Blake, do you have something?
I was going to see if you wanted to get him to weigh in on our Julian Edelman debate from earlier this week.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh, no.
All right. You want to go in that real quick?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting debate about whether or not
it's fun.
Edelman
All right, so
deserves
let's
to
do that. All right, so Edelman is everybody's hung up on his 6,800 yards receiving, but he had over 2,600 yards special teams, and he had over 1,400 yards in the postseason receiving. And now you know better than we do because y'all break all this stuff down. But I was listening to NFL podcasts this week, and they were talking about what a tremendous blocker he was. You may agree or disagree. And that a lot of people aren't going to give him credit as a blocker or a special teams guy. Should he be in consideration for the Hall of Fame? Late. I mean, it's going to be late, way on down the line. But should he be in consideration for Hall of Fame?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, everything you listed was great. I mean, it's like, are you a Patriots Hall of Famer? Yes. Are you one of the better players of your generation? Yes. I mean, look, he was fantastic. And then to me, he would be getting in. If you have to go to those lengths to make the argument for the Hall of Fame, then the guy's probably not a Hall of Famer. If you have to get to a receiver's blocking, he's probably not a Hall of Famer. It's a nice thing. It's great, but it's just like, it's the Hall of Fame. So, I mean, the best argument Edelman has is the moments that he had in the playoffs. Not even the number of yards. It's just the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl in 2014, the great catch against Atlanta in 2016, the MVP in 2018, right? Like, those are the three things he's pretty much hanging his hat on. And they're great. They're great moments and everything. And he was probably the most key receiver, him and Gronk, of the Patriots' second half of their dynasty. So all of those are great things, but I just don't think that's Hall of Fame worthy. I mean, his career is comparable to Santonio Holmes. And to me, a lot of times the Hall of Fame is just like a first instinct type of thing. While you were watching him, was he a Hall of Fame player? Was he one of the best 5 or 10 players at his position when he was on the field? I don't even think you could say that for Julian Edelman. Was he top 10 of the last 10 years at receiver? I don't even think he was. So, I'm on the no, but I'm leaning no for Eli too. So, and even for Phillip Rivers, the more I talk about it. So,
you've said with Eli, you recognize his big moments in the postseason, but when you take the whole body of work, you don't think he's Hall of Fame.
Correct. Yeah, and Kurt Warner's actually going to be on our podcast today, and I used to think this about Kurt, but now when you see what Kurt Warner did, I think his body of work is more special than Eli because he was, at one point, he was the best quarterback in the league, or at least top 3 for a few, and he did it with 2 different teams and 2 different Super Bowl runs and all this stuff. Kurt Warner had like a short burst of excellence, whereas Eli had extended, solid play, and then 2 really short bursts of excellence, right? 2 Super Bowl runs, one of which he was just okay. Second one, he was unbelievable, 2011, and that entire season he was great. So I just think you have to have runs of just excellence and being one of the best at your position. And I think that separates Eli and maybe Edelman from some of the other guys I would put in the Hall of Fame.
Okay. Steve Palazzolo, Pro Football Focus, PFF.com, on the Out of Bounds show, and the Modelo guest line. That's fair enough on Julian.
Text line is outraged about this Eli Manning slander,
well,
Steve.
Every Ole Miss fan, and I get it, is going to believe 100% that he's in the Hall of Fame. and others are going to question it. And he's going to get in because the moments in the 2 moments in the postseason, his last name, and his off the field kind of record, or actually on the field locker room, it was just 5-star. I mean, so he's going to get. I mean, don't you? It may take a while, Steve, but don't you think he's a slam dunk to get in, Eli?
I wouldn't say slam dunk, but I would say I think he gets in, definitely. I think he would get in before Phillip Rivers, and I think Rivers is a healthy debate. I think Big Ben of that class definitely gets in because he was a top 5 quarterback for a while, top 8 quarterback for a while, plus postseason success. I think Eli does get in, and I think Rivers is a toss-up at this point.
Yeah, I don't think Rivers will because of lack of postseason success. But all right, we'll leave it there. Blake, do you have one more?
No, I just thought it was interesting, and maybe Steve can hit on this like 60 seconds, is just how the dichotomy of when postseason success matters and when you also have to do it in the regular season.
Yes.
Because like Edelman's postseason success is elite in theory.
It's off the charts.
But yet he
had all the opportunities.
And he didn't do it over 16 games consistently as a top 5 receiver, like Steve said. Yet there's other players who...
Yeah, but some people make... all right, Palazzolo, real quick. Some people make the argument that the Patriots were up so much in the fourth quarter that a lot of these receivers pad their stats when they're down. You buy any of that real quick?
I would just say, I mean, Brady is the catalyst of that whole thing. So if you're trying to put a receiver in, you have to be like, well, Tom Brady's the guy throwing him the ball. In the postseason, in the regular season, it works for and against Edelman because Brady likes to spread the ball around. So, I mean, I just think it's different when you're looking at a receiver versus a QB because the QB is more of the catalyst.
Yes. All right.
So I think Edelman just had a lot of opportunities that were driven by Brady and Belichick and being in that position.
Do you think Belichick and Brady's endorsement of him both yesterday and going forward will help him? When Belichick says it was a privilege to coach him and Brady went on and on about how what he was as a teammate?
Honestly, I think the luster's going to be – the shine's going to be gone by the time we're voting on Julian Edelman. I think you're going to forget a little bit,
Okay.
There's a lot of recency bias because he was so fantastic. Toughness. I mean, there's so many good things about Edelman. It's like, is Hines Ward a Hall of Famer? Is
he?
Antonio Holmes a Hall of Famer? I mean, I don't think so, either guy.
Oh, not Hines Ward?
So many good – no, I don't think so. I didn't think Jerome Bettis was either. But there's just so many good
Jerome Bettis
receivers of this generation. Like Julian Edelman and Calvin Johnson, they're not even close. Imagine if Calvin was in New England all this time. My goodness.
Okay. Have a good weekend, buddy. Thanks, man.
Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure.
Steve Palazzolo. He's got Kurt Warner on his podcast. You can find it on Apple Podcasts. Search Pro Football Focus. And that's pretty cool. Kurt Warner. That dude was a baller. What was he, UPS, FedEx driver or something, then Super Bowl champ? The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by the award-winning rubs and sauces at Jonesy Q. Jeff Jones just finished number 1 in the rib competition in Tennessee over the weekend. He won it. You can order the rubs and sauces on jonesyq.com if you order $20 or more. Promo code OOBSHOW. Free shipping. JonesyQ.com, award-winning rubs and sauces. Order $20 or more. Promo code OOBSHOW. Free shipping. Back in a second.